Over the past several years, FPS fans have become increasingly enamored with realism. More and more, you'll hear players talking about realistic graphics, realistic gunplay, and even realistic in-game economies. To put it simply, many of us have grown disillusioned with the current state of mainstream shooters, and are searching for something new to scratch that realistic itch. For most gamers, titles like Ready or Not or Escape from Tarkov serve this purpose fairly well. These games offer a satisfying level of realism while still retaining engaging gameplay. And for most of us, these games are sort of where that search ends. More often than not, most of the people you hear complaining about realism end up firmly in the tactical shooter genre. But some players want to push these boundaries even further. They want to explore uncharted territory where realism reaches an almost unsettling level. And this pursuit of maximum authenticity has given rise to a new trend known as ultra-realism, where games are virtually indistinguishable from real life. But before I get into all of that though, I think that this is the perfect chance to introduce you to today's sponsor, World of Warships. If you guys haven't heard of it before, World of Warships is an amazing game where you get to command your very own naval fleet, featuring some of history's most iconic war vessels. You can mix and match your fleet with aircraft carriers, battleships, cruisers, and destroyers, all of which have their very own unique skill sets and abilities. World of Warships also features a ton of different maps and locations, so you'll never get bored of fighting on the open sea. Best of all though, the game is completely free to play, and if you sign up today with my invite code ImpactForce, you'll receive some really cool benefits. With this code, you'll receive 20 days of a premium account, access to a tier 3 Japanese cruiser, a port slot, and a commander. In addition, you'll also receive a series of basic missions, which offers a whole slew of additional rewards. Needless to say, the developers of this game are really committed to growing this experience into something special, and I think that you guys would all really enjoy it if you just gave it a chance. If you are interested in checking World of Warships out for yourself, I'll have a link for it down in the description below. But with that being said, let's get back into today's video. Now typically, in the past, this trend has been heavily driven by the modding community. In just about every game, players will add in 4K textures and tweak the lighting engines, and before you know it, you even have a game like Minecraft killing your graphics card. But now, ultra realism has started to slowly creep its way into standalone titles, offering unique opportunities for developers to redefine how we experience games. Now, for the most part, this has seemed to have been contained mainly within the horror genre, with games like The Backrooms and those other sorts of liminal space titles taking full advantage of making their eerie levels as realistic and unsettling as possible. Some of the stuff that you'll see in these games is actual nightmare fuel, and it's brought to life by these vividly realistic graphics. Recently, one game in particular on Steam has really caught my attention because, according to its own description, it's the very first ultra-realistic shooter made using Unreal Engine 5. This game is Bodycam. Now, before I get into the title itself, if you're not familiar with Unreal Engine 5, let me explain to you why this is significant. Unreal Engine 5, from what I've researched, is a complete game changer for visual fidelity and performance. It's revolutionizing how developers approach game design because it enables them to create worlds that feel lifelike in every sense. To put it simply, it's pretty much doing for graphics what the printing press did for Bible sales. But with that context, you can probably see why an ultra-realistic shooter built with this engine would generate buzz. I mean, typically all the complaints that you hear anymore with mainstream shooters is that the games aren't realistic enough, and Bodycam has literally marketed itself as being as real as it gets. So today I thought it'd be interesting if I did a little deep dive on it and discuss if all of this realism is really worth it. But before we get started, allow me to quickly address a point of concern that I've seen circulating with this title. Many people are accidentally mistaking Bodycam for another upcoming title called Unrecord. While both games fall into the ultra-realistic genre and share a near identical visual style, their core premises and philosophies are very different. Unrecord is a single-player experience where you play as a police officer investigating crimes through a Bodycam perspective. From what I've seen, it's significantly more narrative-driven and seems to have a story behind it. A lot of the Ready or Not fans on this channel probably saw this game, and that's what they're confusing Bodycam for. Bodycam, on the other hand, is a multiplayer-focused title. Developed by Resad Studios, a team of just 2 young developers, it seems like this game takes the realistic perspective in a whole nother direction, focusing more on multiplayer modes and gameplay rather than a narrative or single-player experience. Something else worth noting is that Bodycam was released almost immediately after Unrecord started generating massive media attention. This suspicious timing and the similarities of the 2 games have led some to speculate whether Bodycam was rushed by its developers just so they could capitalize on the hype of another game. That being said though, right now I'm not going to speculate on the developers' intentions, because I'm saving my thoughts on that until the end of the video. For the moment, I just want to focus on the game itself and see what all of this hype is about. Now, when I first booted up Bodycam, I was immediately struck by its unique camera system. Unlike traditional FPS games, the camera movements here feel fluid, yet slightly delayed, as though the perspective is being tethered by our character's body. And I mean, this makes sense, right? Because after all, we're viewing our gameplay through a Bodycam, not the character's eyes. It almost sort of feels like a VR experience, except instead of using your body to control, you're using a mouse and keyboard. This design choice, while really cool and immersive, also takes some getting used to. The movements in this game are definitely a lot looser and more free-flowing than those of your typical shooter game. And while this is nice, it almost sort of feels too jello-y at times. The character movement in this game deserves a ton of praise though. Your character feels grounded with a tangible sense of weight and inertia. Unlike Call of Duty, where movement mechanics like sliding and bunny hopping often take precedence over strategy, Bodycam prioritizes positioning, range, and tactical decision making, and this by itself makes it a refreshing departure from the fast-paced chaos of mainstream shooters. But that rant aside though, the hyper-realistic approach of Bodycam isn't without its challenges. After a few matches, I actually started to feel motion sickness, which has literally never happened to me before. The combination of fluid camera movements and photorealistic environments created a really disorienting effect that took me out of the experience. And while I eventually adjusted, it's worth noting that many other players have reported similar issues. So if you're prone to motion sickness, this might be something worth considering. This aside though, the gameplay itself was actually pretty fun. Weapons here feel powerful with a really satisfying sense of impact. In a lot of games anymore, your weapons just sort of feel like toys, right? But in Bodycam, I can safely say that guns behave like guns. Most enemies go down in just 2 or 3 shots depending on the weapon, and you never really have to worry about mag dumping somebody. The maps that we play on are equally impressive. They're dark, atmospheric, and designed to keep you on edge. Lighting in the levels plays a crucial role in the gameplay, forcing you to make strategic decisions on when to use your flashlight. Do you risk giving away your position to other players? Or do you navigate the pitch black corridors and just hope for the best? This dynamic by itself adds in a level of tension that's rarely seen in mainstream multiplayer shooters. I always appreciated when games would actually make the dark dark. I mean, I always thought it was kind of lame in games when you got the option for flashlight attachments for your gun, but there was literally never any reason to use them. Luckily though, Bodycam manages to avoid this. But while I'm speaking on weapons, attachments, and modifications, I feel like it's important to mention here that this game doesn't have any yet. In fact, Bodycam seems to fall completely short when it comes to customization. There are no weapon attachments or loadout options, and while this might not bother players focused solely on gameplay, it's a bit of a disappointment for those who enjoy tailoring their arsenal. The lack of progression elements here feels like a massive missed opportunity, especially once you take a look at some of the game's competitors. And because of this, I think it's safe to say that Bodycam favors short-term play much more over any sort of long-term commitment. Now, that particular bit wouldn't bother me as much if it wasn't also for the microtransactions being shown. And while I must note that these are only for cosmetics, it just leaves a sour taste in my mouth when games this incomplete start utilizing them. And utilizing them quite poorly, I should add. Shortly after introducing microtransactions, the developers made the decision to wipe away everyone's cosmetic items. They even went as far as completely removing the player customization feature, so they could instead sell paid presets via their in-game store. This decision sparked widespread backlash throughout the community, with a lot of the player base feeling betrayed. Many players worked really hard to earn those items, only for the developers to strip them away and ask for money. One Steam review captures this sentiment. After this microtransaction update, all character customization is gone other than some preset skins locked behind a price tag. I spent 150 plus hours of grinding this game to make my character look the way it did, piece by piece, and now it's in the trash. Big disappointment by these developers. And while I understand the need for revenue in an early access game, this approach completely undermines trust. Alienating your core player base is a surefire way to fuck up your game's reputation. And it's especially frustrating because Bodycam shows so much potential, but decisions like these overshadow its strengths. The game itself has a really cool atmosphere, and additions such as the zombies mode fit the game's aesthetic perfectly. They sort of give you that arcade shooter vibe without going too overboard with it. And while I wish that this was the case for the rest of the game, there are just some glaring basic issues that you just can't overlook. For instance, in this online shooter, in the year of our Lord 2025, you are completely unable to mute other players. It's super rough, and it's something that as a game developer you shouldn't be overlooking. Other design choices also just feel odd. For instance, the main menu includes links to YouTube and Spotify that completely open on their own. And while these might be intended to showcase the developer's inspirations, they come across as unnecessary and unwanted distractions. One of my biggest pet peeves for the longest time has been main menu videos, and this game has those while blaring wild EDM music in both your ears. It just doesn't work. And while at first I didn't want to look at it this way, the more that I played it, the more unfinished this game felt. And I soon started to get the impression that the developers released it in this state just to capitalize off the marketing success of Unrecord. The similarities between Bodycam and Unrecord are impossible to ignore. From the visual style to the marketing campaigns, the two games appear almost identical at first glance. Given the timing of Bodycam's release, it's easy to see why some players view it as a rushed attempt to capitalize on Unrecord's success. And while I'd like to give the developers the benefit of the doubt here, the unfinished state of Bodycam doesn't help its case. Now, I really don't want this to sound like I'm just shitting on Bodycam, because I think that at its core, it has a really solid foundation to be a really good shooter game. The game's dark and gritty appearance is really unique for a modern shooter, and at times in my playthrough, the title felt like it was almost bordering on horror, which was really cool to see. I felt that that was a really good addition to the game that's taken them closer in the direction that they need to shoot for. But the current state of the game modes, the mishandling of microtransactions, and the absence of essential features hold it back from reaching its full potential. As it currently stands, I would not recommend picking Bodycam up. It still has some cooking that it needs to do before it's worth that $30 price tag. And while I'm hopeful that the developers will eventually address these issues, I just can't help but shake the feeling that this game was rushed out to ride the coattails of Unrecord. And I hate to say that because so many of you guys were excited for me to talk about it, but that's how I genuinely feel. I think the Bodycam is a prime example of how graphics alone aren't enough to make a game successful. They're nice to have. I mean, it's really cool to have a game that literally looks like real life, but that should never be your priority. There's a reason why people still play games like Escape from Tarkov and Arma, and I can tell you right now, it's not for the graphics. These games have gameplay loops and features that keep the player invested for a really long time. And when you play this game and that realism gimmick eventually wears off, there's not really anything in place to keep you there. Substance matters in gaming, and right now, Bodycam feels more like a proof of concept than a fully developed product. I'd love to hear what you all have to say though. Did you have a better experience with the game than me, or do you think it still needs some time in the oven? Be sure to let me know down in the comments below. I'd also like to take a quick moment to thank all of my wonderful patrons and channel members for their support. Cosmonaut, Asterix762, Za, CrankyBox99, Dangun, Caillou, Alexander, Neostank, and Tori Hunter. You guys mean the world to me, and you make all of the stuff that I do here possible. So seriously, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Finally, I just wanted to give another thank you to World of Warships for sponsoring today's video. If you guys are interested in checking it out for yourself, be sure to follow my link in the description below. With that being said though, thank you so much for tuning in to watch today's video. You know I love you. I'm out.